Alrighty, back for another HL7AU Patient Summary FHIR IG call. We have ballot issues to go through, going through AFBM and a number of other normative kind of decisions that are tabled for this call if we get to them in time. So it's a pretty stacked agenda, so I'm going to kick off pretty quickly. I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today, and that we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And we acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Our agenda is like this, lots and lots and lots of things. So, usual business, a little bit of a ballot update. Then there's a technical correction with a process point that we need to confirm. We'll do the report back from the incredibly well attended and very interesting IPS call that was on Wednesday. That was pretty fantastic. And then try to chart our path forwards on no known meds. We're going to be aiming to get to a decision today. So let's see how we do. And if not, we will have to time box that and move on to AFMM1. And then if we get time, and I very doubt it, there are other normative change requests. If we don't get to them in this call, they will just bump to the next online call. Does anyone need to put anything else on today's agenda? I'm not hearing anything, and I very muchly appreciate that, given the stacked agenda. Okay, let's go usual business. So, meeting minutes, they were sent round. I'll just bring those up. Do quick confirmation that they are in the right state. Oh, that's Confluence having its fun. This was working not that long ago. What if I went this way? Oh no, that's how you call. Oh, Confluence is having an issue. All right, let's try to do it without looking at Confluence. I looked at them this morning. Confluence is working like 5 minutes ago. Um, they are complete. All the feedback has been included. Does anyone need more time to review those? We can also bump approval of these to the next call if people don't feel comfortable relying on their memory of the Confluence. Not hearing anything. If no one needs more time and no one wants to bump approval, then I'll ask for someone to motion approval of the minutes of the last call.
I will motion to approve the minutes, Doshi.
Thanks, Dushi. Who would like to second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Michael. I'll now bring up the poll. Okay, the poll's up there for voting affirmative, negative, or abstain. If you can't vote, but you've got access to the chat, pop it in the chat, +1, affirmative, negative, abstain. If you've dialed in and you don't have either, just say your name and then affirmative, negative, or abstain. And we've only got 60% of people voting at the moment, so need some more people to vote before we can close this. Okay, just a couple more. All right, I'm going to close that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share the results. With the vote in the chat, we have 9 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next item. So updates. AU basis reconciliation is almost done. There's 3 items left. They don't impact patient summary. They are currently impacting e-requesting. So that is finished in terms of the changes we might inherit. In terms of AU core, that ballot reconciliation is complete. So also any changes we were going to inherit that we've already talked about in these calls, that's all done now. I want to draw people's attention to the electronic block vote that is out. Oh, that's on Confluence. So that link is probably not going to go anywhere. Yeah, their Confluence is down. How wonderful. Dushy, can you pop into the chat the link to the AUPS block vote? Even though, of course, it won't work, it'll still be in the chat record when this
No
is made
worries.
available.
Yes.
Next item is a bit of an update on IPS 200. So the IPS project is planning an errata technical correction release. They're planning for at least a 2.01 and maybe a 2.02. I'm not going to go into too much details on that. It is available on Confluence what's going on. It's about dependencies. So this has been raised by a number of FHIR IG teams that work on jurisdictional ones, including us and the UK, that there were some issues with the dependency being fixed to the old ballot version of the extensions pack, which is now causing a validation failure for any downstream IG. That's being worked through at international and with the fire management group, and they're working on getting a technical errata release out. So I don't know if we'll have that available for the Connectathon, but we'll definitely have this in place by the time we intend to publish, I think, the ballot for working standard. There's a link there. So if you want to go into more detail and find out what's going on, you can follow that and participate in the discussion. Gonna go on to the next update. The Connectathon, the tickets are sold out. So if you want to attend, you'll need to email events@hl7.com.au to go on the wait list. And conversely, if you already have tickets, but it turns out you can't attend, then can you please email HL7 to let them know so that they can give up those tickets, so that you can give up those tickets and they can go to somebody on the wait list. The next thing I wanted to say is, although there's the track kickoffs are already scheduled. They're in the HL7AU Fire calendar. So if you've already got tickets and you're planning to come to either the AU Core or the AU Patient Summary track kickoff, they're in the calendar on the 1st of December. Oh, because this is Confluence and Confluence is broken. Yes. But they're there. They're on the 1st of December, so you can get the meeting details from that prior to HL7AU forwarding the invite, which they will do at a certain point, but you can get advanced notice when Confluence is working. Um, okay, final call for tickets on the Sparked. Basically a TDG day. CDG sold out. If you still want to attend CDG day, you'll probably have to email Sparked. For the TDG day, the last check I had, I think there were 3 tickets remaining. So if you want to come to the TDG day, you need to get in before that's completely closed. So it'll be November 13th. And then if the tickets aren't available, you can email sparked@csiro.au to go onto that wait list. Just reminder, folks, the Zulip for what topics do you want to discuss about patient summary is out and available. That is got a few responses already that I think are informing what is going to be worked through. Hang on, it's down here. That is going to be worked through on the November TDG day. And so this is all going to form part of the basis. So if there's something that you're interested in us including in the workshop, you need to get in pretty quick so that this can actually be organized, because we're not that far off the workshop at the moment. Okay, going back to our updates.
Can I just say, probably today is
Yep.
the last day.
All right, so this closes today, folks. If you've got something that you want to throw into the mix for us to consider how to incorporate in the workshop on the 13th of November, got to do it today. And at least Zulip is still working, unlike Confluence. Given the time that we've already taken to go through this, I'm actually proposing that we give an update on the actions. We bump that to the next call, unless there are any objections. All right, let's do a quick going through of the IPS 200 review Dushi that you were doing for us.
Yes, okay, so this review is now complete and AOPS remains normatively aligned with IPS, so all cardinalities, mass supports and obligations, terminology bindings, data type choices, fixed value and patterns, they all align. Just for information, we have raised a few clarification items with the IPS. So the first three items in the list are about IPS guidance on unknown immunizations, medications, and procedures. So IPS provides guidance on codes to use, but it's silent on how the mandatory elements like status and perform, for example, for procedure, should be populated when asserting no known. So we've just asked for this explicit guidance and an example. And there are also a couple of clarification items on the use of language in element comments that treat like conformance rules, and those are on medication profiles and allergy intolerance medication request and medication statement. So these comments really read like conformance rules, but are not enforced by IPS. So we've just asked IPS for clarification or make wording non-normative. So these are all clarification only. They don't require any changes in AOPS at the moment, and we remain normatively aligned with IPS 200.
Thanks, Dushi. Any questions on that? Oh, Jira's dead too. Thanks, Heath. Oh, this is going to be a fun day trying to get through some stuff. Thank God we've got some slides ready. Okay, let's do quick ballot update. We are still in reconciliation and we only have 3 to go. We've got 3 issues to make a decision on. One of those is in the e-vote that's out, that as soon as Confluence is working, you can put your vote in. And of the things we've already voted on, 70% of those are already applied to the AU Patient Summary FHIR IG, so that's great. We are on track to have a normative baseline for the December connectathon so that we can go test that. Right, I'm just going to move past this one. I think we've done this dispositions to death and I don't need to say it again. If we get stuck on that, we can come back to it. So I'm going to jump into the technical correction pretty quickly. Now, for technical corrections, we don't tend to bring those to the technical design group. They're obvious defects, and that just usually gets technically assessed. And if it is an obvious defect, it gets fixed. What this is coming to this call is because there's a process difference that I wanted to highlight here, and I want us to make a determination on the process by which we are comfortable. Usually, what we've been doing with alignment with Patient Summary, IPS, is we've inherited their obligations, right? And then we might have occasionally strengthened some. What we found during the ballot period is IPS had changed to remove coding display obligations. And they were already in AU Patient Summary, but they'd only come in because IPS has them. We didn't discuss them, and to the degree that we did discuss them on a couple of elements, we were concerned about them and raised an issue in IPS to remove. So there is a technical correction issue that was raised. I wonder if Jira's working. To say that we have got some display obligations hanging around that we originally got from IPS, and we should remove those. And I wanted to check a process point from this group. Still out. The process point is where we find items like this, we should have a process for raising and removing. But first I'll double check, are there any concerns about removing the should display from parts of the coding data type? All right. So in that case, we've got 2 ways we can do it. If we don't catch them all this time and I find another one later, I can either just automatically remove it and then announce that that was removed at the next meeting as an FYI. And then if someone actually wants to intentionally bring it in with the justification, they can raise a change request later. Or we can just bring that before we remove it, we can confirm in a call to say, hey, we've found another one. This should be removed, and call for objections again. So I think we've got these two options, either remove and then notify, or notify, call for objections, and then remove. Vincent, bits.
Hi, Daniel. Um, I assume this is to maintain alignment with the international versions. Is that correct?
Yes, we've inherited a set of rules around must support from IPS. And when we went to ballot, IPS was still progressing their fixes. And so we published before they'd finished removing things. They've gone on and removed obligations, and they were the only reason they were in our document in the first place.
Yep. Yep. I mean, from my point of view, anything that's a technical correction to maintain alignment with the international IPS should just go ahead. It doesn't necessarily need to come to this committee. I think it's really important that we maintain that alignment, and I think that should be pretty automatic, unless it's something really major. But yeah,
Heath?
I think that seems reasonable, but when they're removing stuff, I think there's a potential risk that we actually want to retain it as a strengthener in our jurisdiction. So I feel that we do need some means. I would like to put forward an option C, which is an e-poll, but just so that we're not taking up call time for something like this. But I personally, I do feel that we do need to go through some process.
In rebuttal, because we automatically inherited it, no one ever argued for it. So I feel if someone wants to say that we should have this rule in Australia, I think the appropriate process is a change request with then a justification that the group votes on persuasive. I think that would be the better, clearer way for us to capture why we have this obligation that was taken out of IPS.
I think what I said is similar.
Well, you said let's do an e-vote every time, and I don't think I'm proposing in the two options on the screen at the moment is not to have a vote. It's either we do the automatic alignment and then we come back and notify the group, and if someone was like, no, I wanted that, they can raise a change request and justify why Australia needs that obligation,
How
and
they
then that
know
can be
that it's been
voted on.
removed in order to actually bring it back.
That's why I'm saying, as part of this process, we would have to inform so in no way am I ever suggesting that we don't tell people. It's either automatic removal and then inform the group that this has been removed. And there will still be a tracked change request that someone can follow. Why did that obligation go away? A tracked technical correction. Or we raise this in the call first and ask for objections. Okay, I think 45% of people have voted. Let's have a bit more discussion.
I'd just be happy if the co-chairs looked at it and decided if we need to look at it or not. If you think it's controversial, bring the TC to the group. Otherwise, just go ahead.
Is that automatic removal?
I think so. All right, we've got 60% of people who voted. I'll give just a couple more. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and I will share the results. With the vote in the chat, we end up with 11 for automatic removal, which means we'll still notify in the fortnightly calls if we found any of these and what changed. 2 were for confirming in a call before removal. 3 were for either is fine, and 2 abstained. So what we'll do is we'll trial out the automatic removal process. If that turns out to be a problem, we can adjust. All right, thanks everybody. I just wanted to confirm the process, the way we want to keep going with that. That being said, we're now on to the meat of today, which is getting into the IPS call and our final ballot content. I'll hand over to you, Heath. Did you want to share?
I'll try. Sorry, I need to get myself organized here. All right. Thank you. You can hear me, can't you? Now that everything's
Yes,
off
we
my
can
screen,
hear
I
you.
can't see that.
And I can see a slide that says IPS 2025-10-28.
Excellent. All right. So on, I don't know what day it was. It's been a long week. Wednesday morning, Tuesday in US time. That's why it's the 28th. We had a joint call. So just for your background, I've been attending IPS calls on behalf of Spark for I don't know how many months now. And they happen at about, well, depending on the time of the year, either at 12:30 in the morning or 11:30, could even be 1:30 sometimes. So as we're moving into summer, which is their winter, so they go back basically 2 hours from, so we're back to something ridiculous like 12:30 or 1:30 or something next month. So we asked for a time that we could provide some feedback around the IPS now that it's published, and that was more palatable to this hemisphere. So we did that with the particular agenda that was around known absence of data, and in particular no known medications, as a way to get some guidance on how to resolve the JIRA issue that we will talk about in the near future, and in the near a couple of minutes time. We had 29 people, probably 50% of those were from Australia, but we did have our friend from New Zealand there, obviously the US co-chairs and a few other participants from there, from people that are, I guess, somewhat interested in what's going on in Australia, from vendors like Epic, etc. And we also had Canadian participants, and we actually had someone from Europe there as well, considering it was a horrible time for them. So we walked through a number of issues. In particular, we sort of set out our requirements for patient summary, for known absence reasons that we have in our IG. We raised our concern about the way that the SNOMED definition of a no known medication code and how it's currently modeled, and whether it was appropriate to use that particular code in medication statement, medication request resources, that as it currently does in the IPS2. What we did do out of that was actually agree on the 3 use cases, and I'll present these a little bit later. So this is supposed to be a summary. 3 use cases for known absence of data that we actually specify explicitly in AUPS, and that the wording for those use cases might actually be something that gets pushed up to the IPS because they actually like the way it was expressed better than the way that they express it, and you'll see that in a moment. They also provided some feedback that SNOMED is reconsidering the model of no known medications. So that goes back to the issue that we had around the way it's currently modeled. So that was actually really good to see that someone had already identified some of the issues here and are looking into it. And that may or may not be because of the conversations that we've been having with terminologists here in Australia. We then had a very long discussion around the multiple ways that we could actually represent no known medications in FHIR in general, and not just in the context of IPS. So obviously we want would like to be able to have query an API and find this out independently of it being exchanged in an IPS. And in fact, those queries might be actually leveraged to be able to generate an IPS. So we want to be able to carry that explicit statement of known medications. And some of the examples that were pushed around was using observation, using the empty reason, which has some issues around only being in IPS and lacks some context and provenance. An extension was suggested. Using the status of the medication was suggested. And basically, this could be a little bit contentious, but there was probably two candidate options that we kind of settled on. The observation one was probably a good one. Medication, there's still advocates for the use of medication statement. And there's others that don't think we should be doing it at all. IPS is currently constrained in how it allows us to represent it. We of those two candidates, and that's medication statement. But the other thing is that what we did agree was that the use of known medication code in medication is incorrect, and that will be addressed at the IPS level. So this will probably, final thing, we're looking to have these as ongoing calls. So for those that attended, I mean, I then attended another meeting, it was another 15 hours later, and they were just overwhelmed with how many participants we had from Australia at that meeting. They were really happy with the way the meeting went. And are very keen to the point where they're actually offering to do it fortnightly as part of their IPS. So this, although we called it a kind of a special call, they are actually willing to bring us into the frame as a regular bi-weekly session every other week, so that we're 1 week they can include the Europeans, and 1 week they can include the Australians, and New Zealanders, so I guess the Anzacs. So we haven't got a date yet. There will be a poll probably on what sort of meeting candidates we're likely to have. So it would be interesting to have your input independently of that if you're interested to actually attend those calls, so that I'm not the solo flyer of the flag. Moving on to the change request that all of this revolves around. Any questions, I guess, before I move on? No. Okay. So the actual change request here is 52274, and I'm really glad. I don't know if Confluence is back up yet, but I'm really glad that I went to the effort of doing these slides now.
It is. It is. I just checked.
Okay. Anyway, I've personally, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, but I feel that it's a little bit easier to present, at least on these things using slides. So this is basically the issue that was raised by Danielle when she realized what IPS were doing around this. Basically, it's considering the applicability of the usage of that particular code, known medications, and it's being profiled in a way that it's the value set's being applied to medication request, and medication statement. Danielle suggested that it goes into medication statement as a preference, and it's not recommended to put it in medication, the code that is. But also suggests that medication request is not preferred. And we also need to consider what would an appropriate status value be in a medication statement if we were to when we use that code. So that's a summary of the JIRA ticket. Any questions? Just butt in, please.
Here I can't raise my hand, so I will put a comment if there's time to do so. If we are using medication statement and can't use the medication element, so do we need to add an extensions to the medication statement?
Let me just go through these slides. I am repeating
Okay.
these. I know you were on the call earlier in the week, but
Yep.
for those that weren't, let me just go through these, and then we can start having that discussion if
All
that's
right.
right,
Okay,
Stephen.
thank you.
So a little bit of background. This is what IPS says about empty and known absent sections. And again, you'll see how it's presented within the IPS and then how we present it. But in particular, these are literal quotes. So they're basically saying that resources may be used to assert the known absence of data rather than using this section empty reason, and that they recommend that SNOMED codes for representing known absence of data are included in the profile's primary code binding value set. So, and basically this is applying to the resources, allergy intolerance problems, medication summary, immunizations, and history of procedures. So you would have seen there earlier with Dushi basically raising these other scenarios that we're talking about. Allergies and intolerance and problems, you know, we've got a fairly good use of that already, and I don't think that there's too many people concerned about that at the moment. This process might actually reverse that, but it's a fairly commonly implemented pattern thus far. So we're not worried about those. It is these next three: medication summary, immunizations, and history of procedures. And there's reasons for that. In AUPS, we've got a section around empty section and known absence of data. So I'll just go back a step. The title up here was known absent sections. Here we're talking about known absence of data. So I'll let you think about that, but for me, there's a little subtlety there, and then potentially even only something that's not quite right in their terminology, depending on what they actually meant. The key point here, so, is that we're differentiating the use cases around which we see are mutually exclusive, and that there is an affirmative statement that a patient has no known of something. As an example, no known allergies. There's when there is no data that we can put into a section, and there's another one where there is basically a workflow reason why there's no information, as in we haven't gone down that path of the workflow. We haven't asked the question, for example, so it's simply just unknown. The IPS has another section that talks about what is a medication summary. So I'm moving from the generic around any kind of, or not any kind, but some of those different resources or different sections into the specifics around medication summary now. So they say that the medication summary in an IPS can be either for currently active medications, or it could be a current and past medications that are relevant by an authoring practitioner. So not just current, they could actually be something that's relevant, that is, they're currently not on, but were on in the past. And then the third one, which is about patient prescriptions and dispensers being used to automatically extract out a medication summary from an EHR. And then they go on and say, you can use either a medication statement or a medication request to do that. And when you're populating this section, there are three ways that you can do it. You can use empty reason. You can use an entry to state that the patient is known not to be under any relevant medication, or you can actually populate them with the medications that they're actually on using either medication statement or medication request. So IPS value set. So this is the medication IPS value set, and as I said before, it's actually being used as a preferred binding for medication code, medication request medication, medication statement medication. And you can see the definition of the value set down below. It's basically any medicinal substance in SNOMED plus the known medication, and excludes any vaccine product, which actually is a descendant of medicinal product. So that's the definition of it. Okay, so that's the background around IPS and AUPS. So as we tried to address this particular jury issue, I put out a poll a few weeks ago to ask those that have got systems in the marketplace to provide some feedback on how their users can capture when they are asking their patient whether they're taking any medications, which for me, it's a common thing to that you get asked when you have an initial assessment and you're seeing a new doctor. So we got a few that are doing nothing in their systems as far as there's no way to capture that other than perhaps in a note. There is others that have got explicit checkboxes. And I've got a couple of examples, one here from a primary care system, one here from a hospital system. So we've got a checkbox here that's basically explicitly saying not taking any medications. And over in the right-hand side, we've got not only one that's saying, and this is part of a reconciliation for admission, no known medications. Well, it's actually interesting that it's home medications, but they also carry the other process around unable to obtain the information. Perhaps they're unconscious. So I'm assuming that might be this scenario, but also that it has not been documented. So think about those options that we were talking about previously in our 3 use cases in AUPS that we've explicitly stated. That third one is where we have not gone through the actual workflow scenario yet. So it's just simply unknown. I then followed that up and said, okay, for those that are actually capturing this explicit statement or the explicit statements, how are you actually representing it in FHIR? So basically there's a couple there that have said we're not. And there's one that is saying that they are actually using the known medication as currently specified by IPS. And keeping in mind, this is, I think it might have been inherited from one, maybe it's only new in 2, but anyway, so that's some background around that. Any questions so far? I'll just pause very briefly before I move on to the next one. Brendan.
Sorry, just mute. I've sort of been going through a few of these codes and where they're relevant across major vendors that are in our footprint. And I work in for Queensland Health as an enterprise architect, and jurisdictional integration is part of my bag. But my understanding is that Epic, Cerner, and Orion all use the 787481004 code for medication statement. And likewise, that best practice and medical director also use those codes. So my question to you is what is the practical limitation if you change these? And are you willing to change sort of 350 hospitals that utilize those sorts of systems and the multiple thousands points of care that are utilizing those codes already? And what will you change it to, and how will you negotiate the process change with the clinicians?
Well, that's why we're going through this process, Brendan. And unfortunately, what you've just stated isn't aligning with the feedback that I'm getting from those vendors. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I've captured some data about with those from some of those vendors, and we've got a malalignment. So you could be right.
Is that
And
from
I'm trying to elicit
IGs
the.
or?
No, so
This
what
is
you've got
explicitly
respondents
from them.
from Oracle and oh, you haven't updated this slide in a while. That how does your system do it? We've got respondent from Epic, Oracle, the agency, and best practice have responded with how they, as an input into this discussion, how they record it. And Epic and Oracle haven't said they use that code.
Is there any documents? Have we actually looked at their IGs? Because they publish their profiles on their sites. Have we referenced our version against their versions? Because just asking a question of a person as opposed to actually looking at what their documents say is often not the greatest route. And obviously you guys have only got so much time because it's a massive undertaking that you're doing, and I fully respect that. but I just sort of am worried about the downstream effects, because if we are changing the process for 90,000 clinicians that utilize those fields today and those checkboxes, that's obviously a massive impost from a change management perspective. And if we're replacing it and having to change the back-end systems that capture the data and report on that data, then there's quite a large downstream effect, I would think.
And we're going to take all that into account, Brendan. Absolutely. And that's why we're going through this process. So we're not taking this process lightly. And I mean, I would take one extra step. You're saying, okay, have we compared against their IGs? No, we haven't. We've gone to the source. If that source is not necessarily reflecting their IG, then again, we need to work through that. The other aspect is, does the IG reflect their actual system, or is it a particular implementation of their system, etc.? So there's a lot of variables, I guess, Brendan. But we're not taking this lightly. We'll take all of that feedback in. We're not going to make any recommendations or changes or anything that. So
I think the other thing probably
take
to
that
say
in note
there
when we get to
is
the recommendations later.
the we includes everybody. So
Yeah.
as for when we're presenting this, we don't really typically tend to vote. So it is Epic, Oracle, Best Practice who are voting on whether or not we agree on this particular solution. And so we can only really go through that. And I'm actually kind of asking a couple of representatives now to see if that they can comment on what some of the differences that you've been able to identify versus what I guess they've reported into this process.
And I would encourage you to
I'm
perhaps
happy to be
take the
proved wrong.
time to maybe write, at least myself, if not a more open email or comment somewhere about your understanding of various systems.
No problem. I was trying to log into Confluence to do exactly that, but it doesn't seem to want to let me in today.
All right, so
You can certainly, sorry, because Zulip is still working. I think the right place to do it is in that chat, because that's where we've got the votes from the representatives of all those systems. So I think it's that chat. Let me just post it in this meeting's chat so that you can add your comment there.
And the next step, Brendan, is I'm actually going to go through now why potentially that code's not right. Code's a code, right? And everyone's doing the same thing, but is everyone doing it right? Or is it wrong? And I guess then there's ambiguity around that. And we've been going through this with terminologists, getting a lot of information and advice from various places, and we're trying to come out with a pragmatic outcome of this. Absolutely do not want to be changing too many systems, or at least want to ensure that we're able to support those systems that are currently doing stuff in particular. That's a very important principle that we apply.
Yeah, I understand, and I've only come into this a brief time ago, and I'm mindful of that.
No, I appreciate
and I've
you
sort of been following your
bringing it
conversation
forward.
over the last few days, and I attended the IPS meeting the other day just to make sure that I'm understanding the ramifications of the question. But I'm going through a process at the moment of how am I going to bring in all of these different FHIR interfaces from federal into the organization, and what are the capabilities of the systems that we have. And we're pretty HL7 based currently, but if we move to FHIR and our systems, sooner is R4, and it's US R4. It's not aligned to AU at this juncture. So if that's what our checkboxes are today for all of those clinicians, then obviously there's quite an impact. And we also have primary care footprint, etc. So I'm just trying to make sure that when I'm looking at what you guys are talking about, that I understand how that's going to affect across the board, across all of the systems and all of the clinicians that it will affect within our footprint.
And we need your feedback on that. So encourage it. Thank you for putting your hand up. All right. I'm just going to try and get through this relatively quickly. How are we going with time?
In terms of time boxing, we have to completely move on from this topic on no known meds in the next 13 minutes.
Okay.
So I think it'll be more socialization, and then it might have to be taken to another call.
Yep.
But I'll leave that with you.
Let's see how we go. All right. So no known medications, or is it? So I guess what I'm highlighting in this is shrimp that's actually presenting what is how this term is being defined. So it is, for those that are not familiar with it, we've got a hierarchy here that's working backwards. So no known medications is a finding with explicit context, which is a situation with explicit context. And what that means is that when it's got explicit context, it has these additional associations. So what is the associated finding? In this case, comes from a drug therapy finding hierarchy. So it will be a medication potentially, or a categorization of a medication, and finding context of unknown. And that's the key item on this. So if I'm reading this from a definitional perspective, it is really defining something that is an unknown medication, which is not what the term is calling itself. So I personally feel that unknown medication is different to no known medication. And keeping in mind what we're talking about here is a knownness that something doesn't exist than an unknownness of something existing. The other aspect here is that it is current or specified. So I pretty much specified that. So in particular, how do we distinguish it being current or specified? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, at what point was this statement true of no known medications or etc. So there's a little bit of ambiguity about the way that this particular code is being defined. Brendan, you still got your hand up. Is that a new hand or an old hand? Thank you.
Oh, that was an old hand. I'm always in one.
So for this very reason, in Australia, this code has been deactivated. So if you go into Shrimp and you look at AU SNOMED, you will not find this, or you will find it, but you won't find the definition of this because there is actually inactive. We've removed it from SNOMED AU. And we've redefined a new concept called no known current medications. So you type in no known medications, you'll find the other one, but you'll also find this one. And this one is the active one currently. But unfortunately, this is not a code that is in international or core of SNOMED. And the definition of this one is that it is actually a procedure with an associated procedure of administration of medicine. And its procedure context is an unknown, and the temporal context is current. So, Kim, you're on camera and I can see you just going boom. I'm assuming it's to this. So the idea, I guess from my perspective, we're actually now talking about that there are no known administration of medicine currently. That's how I interpret that. And I'm not a terminologist, so I'm just a techie. So that's how I'm interpreting
Admittedly, I have dragged you into 3 hours of meetings with terminologists before this meeting so that we could understand what SNOMED was doing.
All right, so now I'll put that in the context of FHIR resources. So the definition of a medication statement is a record of medication that is being consumed by a patient. And then it goes on and saying, may indicate that the patient may be taking the medication now, or has taken the medication in the past, or will be taking the medication in the future. So the key thing for me, it's a record of medication being consumed. So if we use this code in that context, then given that it is a finding of drug therapy, it's not a medicinal product. It is not a medication. So it's a record of medication. I'm still not necessarily saying we can't use it, but I am asking the question, is it appropriate to actually use this drug therapy finding code when we're recording a medication that is being consumed? And I guess the key thing there is that it's a finding versus a medication or an administration of medication. And hence that's the moving on to the next one, which is no current medications, the way that it's defined, that it is about administration of medicine and that it's none known. Then going back to the definition of medication statement, a record of medication that's being consumed. Well, we're actually talking about the administration of medicine here. So can this code be used in this medication statement? Again, I don't necessarily know the answer, but is it perhaps a little bit more appropriate? I don't know. So Mandy?
Hi, everyone. I think from experience, the accuracy of how we record this will come very much important in forensics. For example, if there are interactions with a medication, let's say not prescribed and the patient is taking, and the adverse reaction to the medication being prescribed, sometimes medications interact. And having that ability to record this might be a very good indicator of identifying risks, managing risks. So my 2 cents is I really love the way you guys are thinking about the aspects of it, but keeping that in mind that this is not just current, it also can be retrospective for insurance, for protective purposes and forensics. So the wording, I'm learning myself, so I'll leave it into your good hands, but that was just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think that the last comment is really relevant, and I'll reiterate this here around the temporal context. It's current. Maybe, yes, that's current. So this is around it's explicitly stating the currency. But at what point is it? So that's the other aspect of this. And nice segue, right? So what are the other things associated with this? What's the status of this medication statement when we use this code? Is it active? And what's the effective time? So, time of the assertion that was made, which could be in the past. If it's being generated, it's a kind of a now. So that's all. I guess that's the background and the socialization part that Danny was talking about, trying to get you to the point where we can start to move forward into potentially some decisions. Kim, would you like to make any comment? I'm seeing your facial expressions on camera.
My brain's just exploding a bit. And this may not be relevant, it may be tangential, but as a clinician and not a coder and thinking in regular English, with medication, I'm just thinking of how I approach the medication question. So there will be an indication for medicine that I will record in my clinical note that this person's got pneumonia, right? Then there'll be a recommendation by myself that they should take penicillin. Then it's prescribed, then it's issued, then it's presumably taken. And if it's in a hospital context, you can say it's been consumed or the mode of delivery. And then that's also a start date. And then there's when it ceased. And I guess I'm trying to think, like when you talk about, it all depends on context, but I'm just wondering where that whole clinical kind of
Well, I'll go
workload
back to the
sits.
beginning of this, Kim, and we're talking about the explicit statements. It's those checkboxes where whether it's on a paper form or whether it's on, in an electronic form, where you as a clinician are actually capturing that current status as far as you
Yep.
know, based on information you're gathering, whether that's from a clinical record or whether it's the patient themselves or their parents, et cetera, in your situation, on whether they're taking something at this point in time.
And that's
so it's
all we're doing here.
Well, that's part of it. Then there's the automatic, like the AI, the smarter systems that are attempting to do that, and whether that's appropriate is a whole nother conversation. But for me, it's that explicit statement that is being made by a clinician to say there is, as far as I know, they are not taking any medications currently.
And Kim, in an acute care setting, that would be at admission.
Yes.
And so that then becomes then that admission point. It's not something then that gets, unless a parent in your case says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you something," it's then done and the task is, ticked, completed. In regards to that. So, in the systems that, the Oracle systems, you would tick the box as no known, or you would put down their, what we call home medications, or, their medications that they've come into hospital with, or they've had, in an environment outside of an acute care setting. Does that help a bit?
It does a bit. I guess when I was saying before that it seemed very hospital-based, you can be sure and you can assert that a current medication is being administered, it is being taken. Whereas in my context, I'm always using practice management software where the assumption is it's being taken. I don't always see it's being taken. A parent might say it is, and then I realize later, obviously. It's not in the moment that they're not.
And this doesn't imply that it's being taken. It's saying, are you, what you're doing is you're asking the patient, are you taking medication? Now, that is, oh, no, I don't take anything. Oh, I take Panadol. How often do you take it? Oh, whenever. Is that relevant? Is that important? It might be, liver failure. But it then, that I think that's where it's more the, and I like what you were saying, Heath, around, in a sense, it's an observational component. It's not part of, but then that observation, like most observations, then informs what you do after that, which then gets into the, your medication management and your review and other things as well.
So for me, it's a precondition to all of those steps that you talked about previously. It's the step before that, when you're actually gathering their current state, because you have seen the child for the first time. You're actually gathering all of that information, and they may not be on medications, but you're about to then order them. At that point in time, that checkbox no longer applies because you've actually prescribed something. All right. So as you say, you assume that they will take it. So now they're, as far as you know, are taking medication. They're not taking medication. And to be honest, this negation stuff is what is really doing our head in. And that's where the terminologists and the information modelists are really in contention here on how best to manage the negation of this situation safely.
All right, we are at time. So,
Yeah.
quick next steps. You've got 1 minute, and then we're moving on.
Okay, I don't know what the next steps are now, to be honest. Brendan's got his hand up, Daniel.
Okay, Brendan, quick comment, please, and then we need to move on.
It is quick. I was trying to understand what's the process, and if the process changes, what are we going to change it to in terms of a code?
Okay.
Because I can see where your semantics are not lining up. I fully understand that. And from an information architecture perspective, I agree with you wholeheartedly. From practical sense, how are we going to make this work?
Yeah. So the next steps to answer Danielle and your question, I was about to propose a disposition for this juror ticket based on all of that background, which was basically going to suggest that we use medication statement with the code of known current medication with an effective date time of when the statement was made and a status of active, and that we should not be using the known medications. Now it's a should not. It's not saying you can must not or shall not. It is should not. So it sort of allows you to have your systems continue to operate the way they are at the moment, but it is kind of an anti-pattern. And that we shall not use medication request and we shall not use empty reason for this explicit statement of known current medications. And it's important to say current in there as well. So Danielle wants to move on, but that was the next step.
Made a motion, I think, didn't you?
Well, I can make a motion.
Okay, no, I sorry, just clarify, because if you've made a motion, I need to call for a second and then we open up for comments and questions.
Do we have time for the motion?
I think that is largely irrelevant. If you've actually made a motion, I am obligated to call for a second.
Okay, I motion that we have a disposition on this card for persuasive with mod.
Okay, so is there a seconder? Sorry, Mandy, we'll open for comments and questions if there is after the call for a seconder.
Indeed, to move fast.
I'll second.
Okay, Kim seconds. Now we can open this up for further comments and questions. Vince.
You stated that the empty reason should not be used. Sorry, you stated it shall not be used.
Sorry, should not. Should not.
Should not be used. It's actually should not be used?
Should not.
Okay.
So again, if systems, and we know that there are probably systems out there doing it, we're saying should not.
Which is the same guidance as in IPS. So that we're not diverging on.
Sure.
So the key thing here is that we're trying to find one way, one preferred way of doing it in Australia.
Yeah, I understand that.
And keeping in mind that the known medications is inactive in Australia, SNOMED, but it's not, it's a should not. We can accept it if we get an IPS in from outside Australia.
I mean, I personally think it would be nice to put a note that international IPSs may contain a different code for this. Because if you receive an international IPS and you don't know about this 787481004, then potentially you may misinterpret what that is.
So this isn't literally going to be what will go into the IG. This is really I guess the principles of what we want to articulate in the IG, but I think your suggestion is
can we add a friendly amendment to ensure that the IG would contain a note describing this differentiation in usage? I think is what Vince is asking.
Yeah, I think this should not somewhat relevant to that, what you're asking.
No, it is, but I just think it'd be good to have that more explicit.
All right. So we've got a motion or a seconder. We've got the disposition on screen with the friendly amendment to add a note to describe that differentiation currently between IPS and what would be the recommendation within a UPS. Are there any other comments or questions?
Daniel, I keep on trying to raise hand, but I
keep seeing a bell, and I just thought that you were telling us to hurry up. Oh, sorry.
The bell automatically disappeared, so I couldn't find the raise hands
okay,
function.
please go, Stephen.
So my view is that I don't think that medication statement is the correct resource to use, and if we do use it, we do need to consider putting in extensions elements to that. I think that we should have more discussions with the IPS folks and to have some common agreement before we, in my opinion, Australia go ahead and then vote on this one.
Thank you, Stephen. Do you have any response to that, Heath, or are there any other comments or questions?
I have no response. Other than the fact, I guess, that there is only one way to do it in IPS at the moment, and that is using medication statement. And if we
Keith,
were
can I have
to
just one comment quickly? And I guess what I'm trying to do as well is envisage where are we going with FHIR, and how is this going to work in the future too? Because a patient arrives and you ask all these questions, but you have an opportunity now to ask the health network to look in their systems to see what medications that patient has been on. So they may come back and say, no, I'm not on anything. But all of a sudden you get all these messages coming back. Oh yeah, by the way, they were in our practice. We prescribed this and stuff. So everything is in context, and that's always the challenge, I suppose. So it's a tricky one, and I like the way you're talking, and I wish I knew more about the medical arena than I do, other than being a patient.
I do have a second part of the comment as well. In my opinion, the concept of current no known current medication under the context of medication administration procedure itself is by itself is inadequate and inappropriate. So I think even with that, concept itself needs to be explored a bit further, and I would be pretty much concerned that we are rushing this one through without having the opportunity to explore those issues further.
So I think the counter of that, it means that we have no way to do that in AUPS. If we don't go forward, I completely hear, but I just want to make sure that we understand what that means. If we did nothing, as in what I'm hearing is a suggestion that we consider for future use, is that in release 1, we will not have a coherent way of representing no medications. And that's an option for us to do, but that's effectively the alternate proposal of this.
But in the spirit of providing a way forward, we're trying to shoehorn something that is inadequate or inappropriate. To me, it's not necessarily a good way forward.
Which is already passed as standard at the international level.
Well, the international level might need to reconsider it, and that's something that I will raise with the IPS folks.
That doesn't help us in AUPS
no, I understand
or
that.
IPS for, so yeah.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Brendan?
So mine was a question, Heath, when you say that that it's not in IPS, so this isn't in the current IPS standard, is that what we're saying? We're considering it for inclusion, but it's not currently in the standard, so it's
what
not
the
currently in
standard
IPS.
currently does is says that you can use no known medication in medication statement or a medication request or a empty reason or another code, etc. So basically there is not one way of doing it. There are many ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And some of those ways, the advice that we've had is that they're ambiguous because of the way that the current code is defined.
We would have to accept all of them if we accept this one. So what we're suggesting?
What this proposal is doing is saying there is a preference on how to do it within Australia, including what the terminologists believe is the right way to represent the concept of no known current medication. And there are some actions associated with this, which is on the next slide, which I wasn't going to display, but one of those is to actually get this no known current medicines that's currently in a AU version of SNOMED up into the international core of SNOMED so that it's available for international to utilize in their IPSs as well.
So we'll go to Brett, and then we'll consider whether or not we actually have enough consensus to vote, because there has been a number of concerns raised. Brett?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we are in a conversation with the International IPS group, and they have taken some of this on board. There's things that would happen down the track. That's not going to happen in a hurry because they've just released a version, and I mean, the work will continue, but there will not be another release of IPS with new material and for a while. You know, it might be a year or two, right? So I think in some ways we need to decide which way to progress. I think all these things make sense for now. We're producing trial use or working standard outputs, both of us, IPS and AUPS. So I think there's opportunity there for the standardization work to continue, but that's going to take a little time. So I think this is actually a pretty good place to land.
Okay, so I'm a bit torn. I think there's a number of concerns from people. On working through this, I realise that while we might make a motion now, that obviously we still go through the ballot and refinement period, so this isn't the last decision to be made. But I've heard from Stephen and Brendan about concerns on that. Can I also get hands raised from anyone else who is concerned and wants more time to discuss this? Okay, there's one other person, but everybody else feels that it is something that we can make a decision on. Out of 21 people, actually 24, that's the majority. I think we actually can proceed to a vote, noting that we will need to work through those concerns. So I will put up the poll on the vote for the current motion, which is as displayed on screen, with the friendly amendment from Vince. Okay, we have 70%, 80% of people who have voted, just waiting for a couple more. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. I will share the results. So from what's in the vote and what's in the chat, we have 12 affirmative, 1 negative, and 5 abstain. I'll ask the person who voted negative for the minutes. Do you feel that your concerns have been adequately captured by the previous discussion, or is there something else that you would like to state additionally so we can capture that and make sure we have that on record?
Yeah, I am the one who cast the negative vote. I have articulated my concern both in the chat and also in the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, so if there is actually an action slide, did you want to quickly run through that so that that can be actually clear to people on what is going to happen next?
If you want me to, yeah.
I think we need to.
The no known current medication or medicines term, we're going to ask for, I don't know exactly who the right organization is, but for that term to be escalated to SNOMED CT Core so that it's available in IPS for use as it's current. Now that's probably not a done deal, but it will at least go through a process on whether it would be included or not. We will ask for a new value set from the NCTS to have the current Australian medicines value set plus the known current medicines code that's in the Australian SNOMED to be added to that value set, and that will be applied at AU base level medication statement to use that new value set as a preferred binding. So we're going to push that right up into
that would have to be
base.
raising a change request. Well, obviously in this group, we cannot decide on changes to AU base. So that's,
Sure.
yeah, that's a
That's a
suggestion.
request too, yeah.
Okay.
and then continue to provide our feedback to the IPS project to improve the guidance there and basically get some ratification around the approach that we've taken.
Okay, thank you, Heath. Any final comments or questions before we move off this topic? At least for this meeting. I think this will come back.
For the next 6 months.
At least. All right. Then you can, I think, stop sharing and I will pick this up. Now we're going to need to do a little bit of a rejig. We've gone 17 minutes over time, which is, it happens. Repeat all the slides, apologies. Okay, we were going to get into AFMM1. We'll just double check and see how this goes and if we have enough time. I'm not actually sure we do. Dushi, how much time do you think you need to run through AFMM?
Well, with some intro and going through the QA report, we probably need around 15-20 minutes to run through it.
Well, we might socialize.
And that's assuming we have no questions.
Okay, we might socialize and then put this to the next call where that can be going through in more detail. Let's see how we go. So I'll just introduce the topic, why this is even coming up now and what we'll do with it. Sort of where we are now, we're here. So we have almost finished resolving all our ballot for comment issues. And then there'll be a snapshot that we're going to take into the December Connectathon. And we've got a few more meetings to go through and do some development and further refinement work, both meetings locally and also at least one, probably two joint meetings now with the IPS project to work through some of the joint requests from clarification on our side before we go out for ballot for working standard in February. The reason we're talking about AFMM, which stands for the Australian Fire Maturity Model, which is a localization of the fire maturity model, is that this is kind of how we're progressing up to our working standard. This is sort of the phased approach. We were in draft and then we're in a QA period during ballot for comment, and we're now moving from there to what we would call the first level of fire maturity. And there's a number of things that we're going to do and we have been doing here. This is really the definition of the three levels that matter for us, because we want to get to AFMM2 when we publish. Basically, that's probably the entry level for really having a working standard that can be used. So we've now really beyond having a draft. We've done that. We've done an initial draft based on our profile design principles, and we've spent a lot of time here working our way up to AFMM1. We've had a number of connectathons, profile walkthroughs, testing events, and a ballot for comment to really assess the profiles that we have in draft form and what else really needs to be done to give ourselves a baseline to refine from. And then eventually after that, we'll look to get more testing and implementation evidence, which is what will give us that confidence on the next level of maturity. But we're back really here today to talk about AFMM1. And the requirements that are defined for this is that the artifact, so think profile is an artifact, or we've got the actors like AUPS producer or consumer. So the AFMM1 criteria that we're going to assess today is that it has no warnings or errors. We've got an automated kind of build pipeline that includes QA checking that we use, that is also used in HL7 International. And we have to have no warnings or errors that haven't been accepted. There are a number of warnings that are more like best practice or flags for a modeler to consider whether or not they meant that. And so they're not actually necessarily errors with the artifact. And we need to go through those together and just confirm why everything is in there and that we're comfortable with the state of it before we can assess that it's AFMM1. And the other thing we need to do is say, we think we've actually done all the substantial amount of development work. And we're ready for, in this case, it says ready for implementation, but that actually means testing. That doesn't mean like go into a production system. That means it's ready to actually now be tested and refined, and for us to start really assessing its fit for use for interoperability. So that's where we are and what we're going to try to do. But looking at the fact that we've only got 8 minutes left, I think we will hold this over to the next call. Just flashing forwards to say, we think we're there. Adusha and I were talking about this the other day, that almost all of the artifacts have no errors or warnings that aren't already accepted. But there's some new ones, and they're on a couple of the profiles, and we will go through them in the next call, which won't be, I think, for a month, to just run through those with this group and make sure we're all comfortable with what those are and why they're present, and that we don't think there's actually a problem with the profile. So we'll move on past all of these actual ones. And I think we'll also move on past, I don't think we have time to make any normative decisions today, further ones. So let's just run through quickly what's next and wrap up. Okay, well, here's what's next. Our next get together is going to be what we're doing in November at the Canberra workshop, which will have some patient summary workshops and the AU Core R3 backlog pitch. So our next call, which is where we'll go through AFMM 1, is going to actually be the 28th of November. We will also look at the results from the block vote that's out now. Since Confluence is fixed, you can actually vote on that now. So please have a look at it and vote on affirmative, negative, abstain, or refer to Telecon if you think there's something that needs to be brought for discussion at the next call. This is our last opportunity here to make any changes, particularly normative, before we freeze a snapshot and then we go test it at the Connectathon. So we want to prioritize some of those things and make sure then that we can get the experience from the different vendors on going through the validation and also viewing and generating on how that's working. Then we'll have another meeting in December. The date on that isn't decided yet. We'll have a Zulip poll on that. The reason it's not decided is if we held it at our usual time, it would actually be the 12th of December. So it's the same week as Connectathon, and that's probably not great for people. So we'll put out a poll to say, do you actually want to keep that time? Or how about we move it to the following week, which puts it on the 19th of December? And then people can also add in other suggestions if they want to on that Zulip poll. It's not out yet, but we'll create that soon. And then we just break. We take a break until we come back on the 23rd of January. We're going to have only 2 calls next year that are already scheduled before we actually put this out for ballot for working standard. So we really need to be considering what else, if anything, do we think needs to be done before we're actually happy with what would be a proposed first release of AU Patient Summary. We've done a lot of work. We've also got a lot of feedback and a lot of testing on it. But I guess the question is, what else is left? And that's kind of the plan coming forwards. For those of you who are coming, who might come if it's an exciting enough agenda, this is the plan for the November day. Obviously, we have usual kind of welcome and introductions, but there's going to be a patient summary workshop run by Graham Grieve, looking at the functional limitations of receiving an IPS that doesn't conform to the Australian patient summary, and we'll start to address some of those concerns or even identify them and consider them, like kind of what we were raising in the meeting today around if IPS recommends something and we recommend something different, what does that mean? How do we deal with it? Are there any obligations for systems to actually have to deal with both? And that workshop is going to be done in the morning. We're going to do then, after the morning tea, another workshop on patient summary, which will be the hot topics. So that Zulip post that we put out saying, hey, is there something that you want to actually work through? Add to that. That's what we're going to be doing. After lunch is the AU Core R3 backlog community pictures, where that will have a number of pictures from the community who want to add into AU Core R3. And then there'll be a workshop prioritizing our backlog, which will allow people to indicate what they think is a priority for the next release, both from the community pictures and also from the wider AU Core backlog. And at the end, and I just got confirmation, which is fantastic, the agency will be running a session relating to some of the work that they've been doing. So that's pretty fantastic. They're going to come and do that in the afternoon before we close at maybe 4:40. So that's the plan for the day. We've also got the agenda for our next call, which will have a report back from the workshop day. And then we have a number of open normative suggestions for AU Patient Summary that ideally we will work through as many of these as possible so that we can bring them to the December Connector Funder test. And that's basically the plan for the next kind of meetings. Does anyone have any questions about those or anything they want to put on one of the next couple of agendas? All right, well, I'm going to close the meeting there. And thank you all for your time today. And I hope to see you at our next call where we continue to talk through a number of different improvements into Patient Summary. And it'd be good if you're there in Canberra. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.